Hi there, welcome back with me DK in our vlog episode 22, unit 22. Still speaking, we will have more practices and exercises on part 1 of the Ielts speaking. Let's start, everyone. Well everyone, let's get started. Let's start with the first topic, and the first topic will talk about hometown. And as usual, in part 1 of the Ielts speaking test, you're going to hear the typical questions in part 1 of the exam. You should listen carefully for each question, and I will give you 30 until 40 seconds to answer for one question. There will be around 3 until 4 different questions for one topic. So, let's get started. Listen to the questions and answer right afterward.
Tell me about your hometown.
You may answer now.
In what ways has your town or city changed since you were a child?
You may answer the question now.
How could your town or city be improved?
You may respond now.
Are there any traffic problems where you live?
You may give response now. Well, now let's listen for the sample answers. Listen carefully.
Tell me about your hometown.
It's a biggish town in the south of the country with a population of about 150,000. When I was growing up, I always thought my hometown was all right, but now that I've travelled more widely, I know I wouldn't want to live there anymore.
In what ways has your town or city changed since you were a child?
Well, crime has been on the increase since the early 90s. My friends who still live there no longer feel that safe. Also, it has become very congested and traffic is a real problem. When I visit it now, it makes me quite sad thinking how things used to be.
How could your town or city be improved?
Well, the city where I live now is beautiful, and it's hard for me to think of any way in which it could be improved. I suppose if I had to find something, I'd say that it has mainly chain restaurants and shops, so we could do with a greater range of independent places. It would make eating out and shopping more enjoyable.
Are there any traffic problems where you live?
Yes, but I think there are traffic problems everywhere in this country, certainly in all the towns and cities. Here, public transport is really expensive, so everyone drives, and that means we have standstill traffic during the rush hour. They should increase the affordability of the buses.
Great, now let's move to the next. Yeah, let's move to the second topic of the speaking IELTS practices in part 1, and we are going to talk about culture. As usual, in part 1 of the IELTS speaking, you're going to hear the typical questions in part 1 of the exam. Listen carefully for each question, and I will give you 30 until 40 seconds to answer right afterward. So, shall we begin, everyone? Listen to the questions and answer.
What is the most important festival in your country?
You may give your response from now.
Do you think this festival will still be as important in the future?
You may answer from now.
Tell me how weddings are celebrated in your country.
You may give your response now.
What are some forms of traditional dancing in your country?
Please answer the question now. Well, now let's try to listen for the sample answer.
What is the most important festival in your country?
Our most important festival is without doubt Christmas. We all look forward to it for months, buying presents for our loved ones and decorating our homes. It's magical for everyone, but for children especially. When we knew Father Christmas was about to visit, my sister Samantha and I were always too excited to sleep.
Do you think this festival will still be as important in the future?
Yes, I think so. I think people often forget the true meaning of Christmas, though. I mean, they don't think about the story of the birth of Jesus, and in the future they'll probably remember it even less. They see it more as a time for buying and receiving presents.
Tell me how weddings are celebrated in your country.
Well, the wedding party is the most interesting bit. After the ceremony, everyone has a huge meal and then dances all night. Sometimes to traditional music played by a band, sometimes just to pop music played by a DJ. I prefer the traditional music because you can hear pop music anytime, and the old traditional songs have so much meaning and history behind them. The older generation always know all the words, so they sing along.
What are some forms of traditional dancing in your country?
Folk dancing is quite popular, even among young people. The dancers wear traditional costume, which looks beautiful. My favourite is a circle dance performed by women, but there's also a marching dance and a couple dance. I'm afraid I don't know anything about the choreography of these dances. I just know I like watching them.
Great! Let's move to the last topic. Well, we've come to the last topic of this episode, and we'll talk about tourism. As usual, in part 1 of the Ielts speaking, you're going to hear the typical questions in part 1 of the exam. In this case, it is tourism. Listen carefully to each question, and I'll give you 30 until 40 seconds to answer right after the question is being spoken. Now, listen carefully to the question and answer right afterward.
Is your country popular with tourists?
You may answer now.
What sites and activities would you recommend to a tourist visiting your town or region?
You may give your response now.
Do you enjoy active holidays?
Please respond now.
Tell me what your ideal holiday would be.
Respond now, please. Well, thank you. Now, let's listen for the sample answer.
Sample answer. Is your country popular with tourists?
Oh, yes, it is. It's a key tourist destination. It isn't popular with sun seekers because, well, we don't get a lot of sun. But people who are into culture and history love it. We get millions of visitors every year.
What sites and activities would you recommend to a tourist visiting your town or region?
There are a great number of ancient sites near here. For example, burial mounds and stone circles. They're fascinating and I wouldn't hesitate to recommend them to anyone. Luckily, it's actually better if the weather is misty or dismal when you're visiting those sites, because it just adds to the atmosphere.
Do you enjoy active holidays?
Yes, I certainly do. I hate just sitting on a beach. I love hiking. Last year, I went hiking in Nepal with some friends. It was incredibly tough, but really rewarding, and I got very fit and trim. We want to do something similar next year, if we can save enough money.
Tell me what your ideal holiday would be.
My ideal holidays are when I discover new things. So I wouldn't say I have one ideal holiday in mind. But it's true that I would love to go to South America, especially Peru. I believe it's great for hikers, and the landscape just looks breathtaking. I speak some Spanish too, so I could communicate with the locals.
Well done. Hope you did just fine for these exercises. Well everyone, that's all for today's IELTS vlog. This episode, we'll see you in the part 2 of the Speaking IELTS. Goodbye.